In this episode of the Reconcile podcast, we will finally get around to my post-election thoughts on some of the statements Trump has made on gender, on abortion. We will get to the Pope and Jesus being put on a keffia in a nativity scene, and we'll end with just my thoughts on New Year's and some encouragement to you. So thanks for being with us today. All right, guys, happy New Year. I'm a few days late, but I hope you had a great New Year, a great Christmas. I hope you had some wonderful rest time and catching up with family and friends, and I'm really glad that you're here today spending this time with me. If you're watching on YouTube, you will see that the set looks a little bit different. My husband was very kind to get me an upgraded camera for Christmas, and unfortunately it's not compatible with some of my other very archaic equipment that I've been using. So if you've been sticking through this with me as an OG follower, OG listener, with very minimal visual and interest in the background of this set and poor lighting, and at the beginning, very poor audio. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. We are working on it. I am not personally a very tech savvy person. I just know how to talk. But I've got some friends and some people that are helping me try to upgrade the set for you guys. So hopefully that will be coming soon. And until then, it'll look a little bit off. But my husband says this is better because the lighting is at least a little bit softer and the camera is better. So yeah, thanks for sticking with me through that. Also, if you don't mind, please go like and subscribe on our social media, on YouTube, and share with your friends. That's a big help to the show, and it helps others find us. You can also go to our merch website, thereconcileco.com, if you want to help support the show. All right, we're going to start with the election. And I know some of you are out there thinking, man, I don't want to hear anything else about the election. And let me just tell you that I also am very glad that it is over. I feel like even those on the left, maybe not the really radical progressives, but I feel like even those on the left, I think there's just a general sense of relief that it's at least over and we know the outcome and we know what's going to happen. Well, some of what's going to happen over the next 4 years. But I know there's been a lot going on online, a lot of probably stress, a lot of noise. And so I hope today that I'm not going to be more of that. I'm just going to give you some of my thoughts, what I'm celebrating, some of the statements that I'm really excited about with the Trump administration, and then some things that I disagree with him on, because I'm always going to be honest with you. I do not totally endorse Trump as a person. I don't endorse everything that he's done or even all of his policies, but I do believe ultimately that he is the best leader for this nation at this time as far as the options that we had. And that is a good segue into someone that I want to talk about something that he said. So Josh Howerton is the lead pastor at Lake Point Church, and I've listened to several interviews with him, and the one I'm going to link in the notes today is with Frank Turek on his podcast, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. And one of the things that Josh does really well is he just has so much clarity surrounding the election. And if you have not listened to his sermon, you can also go to their website and listen to his sermon. I believe it's called How to Vote Like Jesus, but I'll be sure to link that in the show notes as well. But in this interview, something that I want to point out, I want to encourage you today too, even if you are a liberal or a progressive, and that's how you identify right now, and you're listening to this show, I want to encourage you with this too, especially if you identify as a Christian. This show is mainly, I am addressing other Christ followers from a biblical perspective and biblical worldview. So if you are a Christian and you consider yourself to be a progressive, or you consider yourself maybe socially liberal, I've talked about before how I don't really view those two. I really see those as two separate worldviews. I don't think that at the end of the day, they're very compatible. But if you're here, I just want to encourage you, especially if you were one of those people that looked at both candidates and you saw flaws in both candidates, which there are, and I hope that if you're a Christ follower that voted for Trump, that you will admit that, because that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem with that movement, is that there were admittedly a lot of people that did not want to face some of the issues with Trump and his character, and especially things that he's done in the past, or at least been accused of in the past. And so we don't want to be totally shut off to admitting those things and addressing those things. Definitely not. So if you're one of those people that looked at both candidates and you thought, I can't vote for either candidate, or say you did vote for Kamala and you're feeling very desperate, or you're feeling stressed about the future, I want to lay something out for you that Josh does really well in his sermon, that I think even if you're not a Christian, that there's some merit, that there's some truth to this that we can have. There are, as much as I hate the word nuance, there are some areas that we can be a little bit more nuanced. And I don't like that word because it's used at inappropriate times with inappropriate categories. But this is one of them that we can be a little bit more nuanced about, which is different kinds of leaders that we see in the Bible. And so Josh talks about these different kinds of leaders. There's the Josiah leaders, the ones that are very righteous, that it's really what any true Christ follower with a biblical worldview, that's the kind of leader that we would want. He honors God, he loves God. And then you've got the Jezebel leaders. Of course, they're very wicked and they promote things that God hates, that the Bible is very clear on, and they celebrate those things and they dishonor God. And then you've got Jehu leaders. And these people, although very flawed in their character, maybe they don't even really know God. There is some debate about that theologically, which Josh mentions in his sermon, but they are used by God despite the flaws in their character, which truly this is any of us, right? We all flawed. We all fall short of the glory of God. We all sin and do things wrong. But these people are flawed. Maybe they don't even really know God, but they are used by him for the good of the people and for good purposes. And this is how I see President Donald Trump. He's not perfect by any means, but the others, and we've talked about this many times as well, and we have to be realistic. We really only had two candidates that had a shot at winning this election in our culture, in the way that our politics work. It's a two-party system, whether you like it or not, and Jesus is not on the ballot. So Donald Trump or Kamala Harris was going to win this election, and you have to look at these categories and say who best upholds the biblical worldview. And that is, of course, Donald Trump. Of course, it's not even close. And it's very frustrating when I get in these arguments or these back and forths online with people that identify as progressive Christians that try to use the Bible to justify voting for someone like Kamala. It doesn't make any sense if you really hold to a biblical worldview, which that's something else I'll link in the show notes. I can't go over all of it today, but if you don't follow along George Barna and the work that he does with statistics out of Arizona Christian University, you need to. But he does essentially this end of year statistics on the American worldview. And what it shows is that only 6% of Americans have a biblical worldview, even though roughly 2/3 of Americans self-identify as Christian. So what that tells you is there are lots of people walking around thinking they know God, thinking that they're saved, and that they really don't know him because they don't know his word that he revealed to us with all of its truth and all of its goodness. So this is a problem that we have in our nation, and it can be very confusing and frustrating, especially for conservative Christians, when you've got these primary issues and you've got these other people that self-identify as Christians, and yet you don't agree on these very central tenets to Christianity. So if you haven't seen it, you need to go check out Josh's full sermon on it. It really lays it all out very nicely. And so here's the thing with having a somewhat Jehu leader, because we'll get into in a minute some of Trump's statements, and there really is more that I agree with him on, not his personality, not his past. I'm not endorsing his past or his personal character. I'm talking about policy here. That's a very important differentiation. We don't vote on personality or looks. We vote on policy because, as Josh says, this is a great line from his sermon, that personalities will come and go, but policies last much longer. So, but my point is, with having a Jehu leader, is that our job is not done. It never would be. It wouldn't be if we had a Josiah leader, but it would be maybe a little bit easier. But having this Jehu-like leader, our job is not done. We can't sit back and relax and check out, because that's how we got here in the first place. If we're really being honest, this is how we got here in the first place. It's Christians that on a massive scale are biblically illiterate, that don't hold a biblical worldview, that are sold these lies by society, like that we are for some reason not meant to be involved in politics, even though God created the state. He created 3 institutions, and that's marriage, state, and the church. And so the world has been telling us that there's no evidence for Christianity for a long time. We've lost just the ability to be intellectual Christians. We've lost biblical literacy. We've been sold all these lies by our society. And we know what's behind that. It's Satan, because he wants to come in and he wants to take over everything that God has created. He can't really create anything new. He just wants to destroy everything that God has created. And that's no different with the state. So if we sit back and we refuse to be a part of that, if we refuse to steward that well, this is again something Josh has said, and I have to credit him, because it's invaluable the way that he is speaking so clearly on these issues. It's just as wrong as if a man refuses to lead his family, or if a pastor refuses to lead his church. Well, that's what we're doing in a constitutional republic as Christians. We are refusing to lead our nation and being led by the lies of society, that, of course, if there's only one of 2 sides, you can't serve 2 masters. It's either Satan or it's God. So if our society is led by a lot of people that don't believe in God, then who are they serving? They're doing the work of Satan. It's just that simple. And that's not to say that those people can't do anything good or that they're invaluable as human beings. They are. But as Christ followers, we know that the best thing for society and for our nation is to live under the truth of God, which is reality, what is actually best for those around us. So our job isn't done. Don't check out. I know you're exhausted, and hopefully you had a little bit of a break there for a couple months. I feel like things have been maybe slightly more normal, but maybe it's just because I deleted social media off my phone for a while, which I recommend doing every now and then. Just purge it and take a break altogether. So we need to keep working, keep sharing the gospel, and keep sharing the truth. Our job is not done. So let's not revert back to being just wiping our hands of politics. So let's talk about some of the statements that Trump has made. I'll start with the good, the things that I really appreciate about him, and some of the statements that he's made that I'm really excited about, because 95% of politicians, that's an ambiguous statistic I'm throwing out, but most of them, there are only a few, like a handful that I can think of, that would have the guts to say the things that Trump says. So regardless of what you will say about his character, this is why people like him. Okay, I know he has flaws, so please hear me correctly. But this is why people like him. We would rather have a ruler that can sometimes come across as mean, maybe use some foul language, okay? And I'm not advocating for that again, but these are just things that he does that, as a Christian, of course, we don't love it. And he can be mean, he can be crass, he can say these things, and you're like, why would you say that? Just stop, please. Sometimes just bite your tongue. But the reason people like him is because he's a strong man, and he is truthful to what he believes, and you can't say that for most politicians. There's everything about Trump, he wears it on his sleeve. Who he is who he is. What you see is what you get. And with most politicians, you never feel like you really know who they are, or you really know where they stand on anything. It's basically whatever they're being lobbied for or what they're being paid for. It comes down to greed. But Trump is not that way, and that's why people like him. I will say in a minute, though, when we talk about abortion, his mind can be changed when he's presented with new information, which is a really good quality as well. So a couple of things that I won't do a deep dive on, but I'm really excited for the Department of Government Efficiency. We have a bloated government. The government has its hands in the work of the church and the responsibility of the church. And we're going to have some more interviews soon, hopefully, that have to do specifically with welfare, with poverty, with marginalization, with addicts. We're going to talk about these things. They're really difficult to talk about because it's not always black and white, but I don't believe that our nation is doing it correctly as far as how we handle those things, even on an individual and church level, but definitely not in the way that we abdicate our responsibility to take care of the poor, which, by the way, is not always homeless. It's not always who you might think as obvious, okay? It can also mean children inside of the womb, those that are undefended or don't have a voice or don't have someone protecting them. So I am excited for this because it's not the job of the state to provide welfare. It's not the job of the state to take care of the poor and the needy. It's the church's job. It's an individual's job. And so we have this bloated government that spends way too much money, that is essentially seemingly trying to bankrupt us, sending money to all these corrupt nations. We're funding terrorists. So yeah, I'm excited for this. I hope they come in and they get rid of whatever they can get away with. I am for having a much smaller government, especially when you talk about Trump's talked about the Department of Education, and people have lost their minds about this. But listen, we have kids being indoctrinated in schools to believe that they can change their gender, which is a biological impossibility, but we have children graduating believing that, but not knowing how to read. Okay, so I don't think the Department of Education is doing its job very well. So at the very least, it needs an entire overhaul, and we need to get people out that are lobbying and only care about money and their teachers' unions. And I know teachers personally. I love many teachers, and I know that they do their best, but this is really a top-down problem. So I don't know all the answers or the solutions, but I am excited to see what this brings about. So I'm excited. And then leading into that, I'm excited for tariffs. I'm excited for someone that sees an actual way to pay down our debt, to really change our nation, to turn it around, because you are lied to about tariffs and about the economy. These people, I even saw a post on X the other day where someone was trying to claim that inflation was 2%, I believe. And the comments were just absolutely roasting them, because we all know that that's not the truth. You can keep repeating that lie. You can keep telling people that it's really not that bad and they've created all these jobs, but we all feel it. We all know the truth. And you can have all of these Harvard or Ivy League economists saying, well, the tariffs are going to be terrible. They're going to cause all these problems. They're going to bring the cost higher to the consumer. And so here's the problem though, they're not giving you the full truth. That's what they do. They give you these half truths, so they don't give you the full story. The thing about tariffs is, bottom line, it brings money into our country that we deserve. That, like Trump has said, we are being raked over the coals by these countries, like in the United Nations, where we're paying all this money and nobody else is paying any money. It doesn't make sense what we're doing economically. If you ran your household this way, you would go bankrupt, or you would go to prison for tax evasion or tax fraud, or just mismanaging your money. You would lose everything, and we cannot continue to run our nation that way. So yes, maybe there will be some things that are more expensive. I do believe that that could happen, but what the reason for that is that we're going to pull those companies back to our country rather than paying child labor in other nations. We're going to pull those companies back to our nation. That will create American jobs and growth in our economy rather than another country. And so we're going to have higher wages, which means, yes, you might be paying a little bit more, probably for a much better quality product. Okay, we've all ordered stuff from China. It's just not good. It's not high quality. And then you've got all of these progressives worried about human rights, but somehow they're not worried about the child labor that produces their iPhones or whatever we're ordering off of Amazon. So yes, in the long run, this is going to be better for our nation. So make sure that you're reading between the lines on things like that, doing your research on things like that, and not just the top results on your Google search. Of course, I'm excited about the border. I'm excited to have a secured border, to have less crime, to have less innocent Americans dying by illegal immigrants that have been brought into this country already convicted of crimes. We've already talked about this. We've done a couple episodes on this. We've done one with Bill Federer, and then we've done one where I cover this, so I don't need to get into it in depth today. You can go back and watch those episodes where I talk about it more in depth and why you should be for a secure border and why borders are actually God's idea and His creation. So next up, I'm going to play you a short clip of Trump's statement on gender.
We will promote positive education about the nuclear family, the roles of mothers and fathers, and celebrating rather than erasing the things that make men and women different and unique. I will ask Congress to pass a bill establishing that the only genders recognized by the United States government are male and female, and they are assigned at birth.
There are so many politicians that can't even state this very simple biological fact that we're made male and female, that you can't change your gender, that it should be criminal to attempt to change the gender of a child. It's an experiment and it's evil. It's satanic. And I praise God that we have a leader that has the gall to stand up and say this, which it really shouldn't be hard to say. It's something that has been accepted over the course of human history, and so it shouldn't be hard to say. All right, last thing we're going to talk about today is Trump's stance on the abortion pill. So initially he came out saying that it would be very unlikely for him to ban the abortion pill, but now, according to Remnant News, we've got a little bit of going back and forth here and a little bit of not as much clarity on this. So on December 12th, Trump says that it's very unlikely that he would restrict access to the abortion pill. And then we have a Remnant News article that came out on, let's see, when was this? December 20th, that says incoming Trump admin sends mixed signals on abortion. President-elect Donald Trump's stance on abortion pills remains unclear. While he recently stated it's highly unlikely he would restrict mifepristone access, his pick for Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has pledged to reinstate in-person dispensing requirements if directed. This is a quote from Senator Josh Hawley. He will absolutely do whatever President Trump wants after, this is something he said after meeting with Kennedy. So the thing about the abortion pill is that truly there are so many lies being spread about the abortion pill, about the reality of it, about how safe it is. And I've also done an episode on that, so you can go back and watch that. But the main thing I want to talk about today is that this is why it's important not to check out at this point and to know that there's still work to be done, and to also praise God that we have a leader that is willing to change his mind when presented with new information. The abortion pills are not safe. There are probably many, many, many more deaths and hospitalizations and emergencies that have happened from these abortion pills than we will ever know, because the media has been in the pocket of the Planned Parenthood agenda, the Democratic agenda, and they protect them. They, just like Kamala Harris did when it came out, the reporter in California, I've lost his name at the moment, but he revealed that Planned Parenthood was selling aborted baby parts, and she actually prosecuted him and did not investigate Planned Parenthood. So this is the level with which they've been protected. So we will probably never know just how bad this has been, because you can actually get these pills shipped to your door. Do you understand that? You can get an abortion without ever seeing a physician, without even confirming that you are as far along in pregnancy as they say that it's safe to take it. I believe it's only through 11 weeks that they say it's quote unquote safe to take it. Of course, it's not safe for the baby. It's ending the life of the baby in a violent and brutal way. So it's not safe for the baby, but it's also not safe for women, and it's been linked to cancer. So they're lying to women about these things. They're hiding God knows how many potential fatalities or, like I said, emergencies, hospitalizations from these pills. And, I'm sure that RFK is going to get tons of pushback on this. But you should, at the very least, of course, I think it should be illegal. But as common sense, you would think that you need to see a doctor and be confirmed that you're even pregnant before you take something like this. But people have problems with that because they're not pro-choice, they're pro-abortion. They want abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy, no questions asked, because they're either they do not understand what an abortion is, which I would say is unfortunately a good majority of people in the United States. They've been lied to about it for so long, they don't truly understand what it is, or they're blissfully ignorant, or they're just on the side of wickedness. They understand that it's a baby and they're fine with ending that baby's life just because it's convenient for someone, just because they want to, just because they would rather do that than go on birth control or stop having sex outside of marriage. So that's a little bit about the abortion pill, but my main point about this today and Trump's statements, and that now it's coming out that it's unclear. He said before, you've got to win an election. He avoided the question a lot. They didn't really give the stance that I would like on it, but they did highlight the issues with Kamala and how extreme she was. There are not many politicians that will say the things Trump did, where he called her out for allowing children to be murdered up until the moment of birth, or even after a botched abortion, which she tried to say doesn't happen. So if you remember, in Florida, the Amendment 4 bill, at first Trump came out saying he was in support of that he was going to support that. And then later, when he was presented with new information, when he was actually told what that really meant, he changed his mind. So that's why it's important for us to keep pushing, to keep talking about this, because it is possible. And of course, to pray for him. We are called to pray for our leaders. No matter what we disagree with them on or agree with them on, we are called to pray for them. And so we should pray for Trump, that he would truly know God if he doesn't, that he would rule this nation as someone that honors God and honors his word, and especially would protect the innocent and punish the guilty, as that is the main role of the government. So my hope is that we can keep talking about this. We can keep pushing Trump. I know there are a lot of people, like Lila Rose got the chance to meet with him from Live Action. So I know he's got people in his ear telling him the right thing. And so this is one of the things, the only thing I can really say, that when he gets in office, I pray that he changes what he said. I pray that he would sign a national abortion ban. I think that's very unlikely, but I pray that he would. But at the very least, I pray that he would end this unfettered access to abortion pills that are definitely hurting babies, but I'm sure also hurting many women. I do think it's important to talk about, mostly because I've criticized the Pope before on his stance in a Muslim, mostly majority Muslim nation, where he said that all paths lead to God, which is absolutely not biblical. But also, I've started to notice this trending lie start to circulate that Jesus was not Jewish, and that Jesus, they're calling him a Palestinian, which is wild. But at this point, I'm really not surprised by a whole lot. So Pope Francis participated in the inauguration of a nativity scene created by Palestinian artists from Bethlehem, which features a baby Jesus resting on a keffiyeh, a scarf symbolizing Palestinian heritage. This keffiyeh-draped cradle is part of a series titled Nativity of Bethlehem 2024 and will be displayed in the Vatican's Paul VI Hall. The artwork, as reported by Vatican News, highlights cultural expressions tied to the birthplace of Jesus while offering a unique perspective on the nativity tradition. It has since been removed from display. So there are so many problems that I have with this that it's hard to know where to begin. First of all, Jesus was a Jew, and this should not be controversial to say. But it's not surprising, because there's been so much false rhetoric surrounding the entire Israel, Hamas, Gaza Strip conflict And we did an episode on this earlier as well, covering the history of the word Palestine. So, what's happening right now is that, in large part, due to all this conflict and the rhetoric and the cultural narrative surrounding this and the support of Palestine and even open support of Hamas and terrorist groups that have been happening on United States college campuses, which is absolutely wild, but that's what's happening. That's where we're at. I do believe that a huge part of that is just because people are being lied to. So I do have compassion, but we have to use our brains. And Akefia is Muslim garb. And this is revisionist history because Bethlehem, it was in Israel. It is not Palestine. And we talked about the word Palestine and where that came from. That came from a Roman emperor, and that came from the Roman emperor Hadrian, who was credited with renaming the Roman province of Judea to Syria Palestine in the 2nd century AD. The name change is thought to have occurred after the revolt of 132 to 135 AD. So what happened is the Israelites revolted against Rome, and they decided that they were going to change the name essentially as an insult to Israel and to wipe them off the face of the map. They did not like the Israelites, and they had dispersed them. After this revolt, there were many Jews killed, and then they dispersed, and that's how they ended up in Europe and Africa and all these different places. That's where we find them leading up to World War II, and then they obviously resettle in the 1940s and have their own nation again. But that's how the word Palestine ended up being used for that area. So what's happening right now is revisionist history. They are trying to usurp the name of Israel. They are trying to make you believe that Jesus was a Palestinian. No, he was not. And the Bible is very clear on this. When I read into this and I was researching for this, I thought about the fact that how many times have I been reading my Bible and there's been endless amounts of lineage? It'll list off the lineage and heritage and family lines and all of these things. And you've got that in the Gospels with Jesus as well, that they're going over this. We all tend to, I'm sure, wonder, why is this here? Why is this so important? But this is why. This is why. It's because God in his sovereignty knew that we would need it, and he provides evidence so graciously for us. And so this is just false. It's just ridiculous. And so, but the other element to this is just the audacity of putting Jesus on this Muslim garb of a religion, a violent religion that hates Christianity, that does not even recognize Jesus as deity. This makes zero sense. It's an insult to Christianity, and it's just a whole part of this movement with the Pope. And I'm sure this is probably not true of most Catholics that attend Mass and identify that way, but it seems to be the movement of the Catholic Church, starting with the Pope, to essentially try to normalize Islam and Muslim practices at the expense of the truth. So this is just a reminder today that people can say anything on the internet. So just remember that. Jesus was a Jew. He was not Palestinian. That name was given to the land of Israel by a Roman emperor that hated Jews and wanted to erase them from history. And so last but not least, we'll talk about New Year's. Honestly, I am really excited for a new year. It always feels a little bit like a fresh start to me. And I've started writing down my goals. Not that there's any magic in that necessarily, but I do believe it helps. I think it helps to have an accountability partner. And so I've implemented some of those things. And so it's good to look back on 2024 and feel and know that I am not the same, that there has been progress and growth in my life. And just to be reminded that the Lord's mercies are new every morning. Lamentations 3:22 through 23 says, "The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness." And so we can be sure that if God's mercies are new every morning, they are definitely new every year. And so it's not too late to get started. In this very moment, you can have new mercy with God. You just turn to him and you ask for his help. You ask for his forgiveness. And so he's so gracious to give us these seasons where we can feel refreshed. We can have new energy. And so I hope that you will write down some goals, and a wide spectrum of them. They don't always have to be spiritual, but definitely don't forget that, because the Lord, He wants to grow you. He wants you to know Him more than you want to know Him. He wants to have relationship with you. And so take advantage of this new season in life, and just a fresh start. So I pray that today was helpful for you, that it emboldens you, that it equips you, and that you have an awesome 2025. I'll see you next week.